Hey guys, how's it going? So I think for our first project, I've decided to move in the direction of a bookshelf. I'd come up with a couple of different ideas, and just so you realize, my plans usually start with something like this, and they'll end up with something a little bit more like this that I can actually read and work off of. And as per usual, still in the planning stages, so not even ready to make the first cut. And I go through a couple things, and I go through my theory, and I go through how I think I want to do it, and I prepare myself, make sure I have the right tools and equipment, so then that way, when I get going on the job, it's much easier, much more fluid, and I feel that my workflow is much less sort of torn and divided. We're gonna work on some power tools. I'm gonna bust out the table saw. I'm gonna cut some material down that I have, and we'll do everything from cutting, joining, gluing, clamping, drilling, nailing, maybe even a couple of dados. I haven't made the decision yet. And then at the end, they'll be finishing and staining. So stick around, it's taking a little while, but I hope that the video quality and the sound quality is to your liking. And I hope that you enjoy following me along on this project. And down in the comments, if there's anything that you want to suggest for future projects or mistakes that I made, I'm more than happy to listen. And if you have any questions, please comment. So here's what I'm thinking. I need two pieces at 6 inches each, so that overall my total depth can be 12 inches. And the two pieces that I have are 8 inches each. So I can either set my saw to 6 inches and make a 6-inch cut, or I can subtract from my material from the 8 inches and make a 2-inch cut and be left with 6. 6 to 1, half dozen the other, you can do it either way. But before I get started, I always like to set up my saw and take a test cut on a practice piece to make sure that I'm dialed in correctly. That way I know that when I actually cut the material that I want to cut, I'm not losing out on any material that I can save for something else. First thing I do is I bring up the blade so that the teeth sit just above the material, ever so gently. You don't want too much bite. And then I'm going to pull out my handy dandy old school Stanley, and I'm going to take a flat measurement. I have decided that it is in my interest to take a 2-inch cut from that. So I'm going to go ahead and measure from the fence to the right side of the blade, because that is where the cut is going to happen. So let's go ahead and set our fence up on my super high quality saw. Not a paper motion. And what's really important also is to take your measurement not only at the back, but also at the front of the saw, because sometimes the fence could be mildly kicked. Okay. Safety first. Let's take a look. See how I push through? Sometimes it's better to drop the piece than it is to sacrifice the situation. We can go ahead and check our cut. Wouldn't you take a look at that? It's almost like we meant to do it. All right, so I went to go grab my material, and here's the situation we're up against. Material is really, really long. I don't need all of my pieces to be this big. Now, I could run this whole piece through the table saw, but it would be much easier if I had someone here to help. So since I want to play it safe, what I need to do is I need to go ahead and break this piece down into near or about the measurements that I need from it, because then the smaller pieces will be substantially easier to run through the saw, especially safely and alone. Now I can do that a number of ways. I can save myself the hassle and go the old school way and use any number or style of hand saws to be able to separate that piece on a crosscut. Even these old ones work just fine. Or I can step up into an electrical circular saw, or I can use what's called a miter or a chop saw, which is what comes down and works like that at a 90-degree angle, perpendicular to your work. Me personally, I'm going to cut down with an electrical circular saw. I'm going to then take that piece, rip it down, and after it's the right width, I'm then going to take it over to the chop saw and dial it in so I can get the exact perfect measurements for the pieces that I need to create. My first cut needs to be made at 32 inches. Typically, the way that I would handle a situation like that is I would take a square, I would take my tape, I would measure out 32 inches, and I would set that square on the edge of my work and draw that perfect 90-degree angle. But Chris, what happens if I don't have a square? Well, fortunately, geometry and math always has a solution for the hard-working man. What we're going to want to do is we're going to want to take a look at our work, and we're going to want to find what's called a factory edge. When you buy material, it comes in a premeditated size and diameter. So this piece specifically is 8 inches by 10 feet. So I know that when I take the measurement, and it tells me I am at just about 10 feet, I know that this piece hasn't been in any way cut, checked, or changed. So based on the factory settings of their sawmill or wherever this was cut, I am pretty fairly certain that I have a 90-degree angle here from the factory. That's what they call a factory edge. Is one that hasn't been worked on or modified by us yet. So then what I would do in that case, so since I now know that this edge is perpendicular, or 90, I can then run from it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take 2 measurements. So I need 32. My first measurement's going to be off the top, along the top edge. My next measurement, 32, same thing, just off the bottom edge. Now, basically, by drawing 2 points, all I need is a straight edge to connect them, so I can guarantee that that line is good. And basically what we just did, through the magic of math, we projected this straight edge to our desired dimension. Now let's go ahead and make our cut. Now here I am, I'm all set up and I'm ready to make my cut. I'm secure and I'm safe. I got a clamp on the work and it's not going anywhere, unlike the camera. Now I could have a clamp on the other side, but since I'm pressing down here, I know that I'm safe. And I'm also pressed up against the fence, so I know I'm not going anywhere. Like I said, what I would like to do is I would like to take the cut just a little bit further than the 32-inch mark, because for the sake of this project, I really need it to be as square and perfect as possible. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the cut a little bit further, probably about by 1 inch to 2 inches, because I'm going to take it over and straighten it up on a miter saw after the fact. It's a bookshelf. It's kind of important that it be almost as perfect as I can make it. So don't judge me too hard for being slightly off the line, but what I'm going to do is line up my little reference mark, give myself an extra inch, inch and a half maybe, and I'm just going to go ahead and make a nice, clean, straight cut following my line as best as I can. Once again, I'm trying to show you how to work without a square. If you had a square, now would be a great time to set up your saw, take a look at where your blade's going to make the cut, and then you could put your square directly here and run your fence along that square. That's something I'd be more than happy to show you either in another cut or in another video. Let's go ahead and move forward with our cut. So I'd give myself a little bit of extra room so I can square it up on the miter later. And let's go. That's it. Nice and easy. In the interest of continuing to work without a square, I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing because I need more cuts of 32, so I'm going to go ahead and get myself in the ballpark and even go slightly over. So let's say give about 32 3/4. So these edges are gonna start getting pretty wonky, but like I said, we're gonna be straightening them out later. And right now, more than anything, I would just like to show you different ways and methods that we can cut something. You know, everybody is always concerned about, oh, you have better tools, or I don't have this or that. And you know, I've seen guys that can pretty much almost do everything we're gonna do on this project with a router. So me personally, in the handsaw category, as much as we love the old American grade push saws, such as these, the Great Neck and the Stanley that I have, I personally have become rather personally more passionate about the Japanese pool saws. This is a very cheap one that I got from one of our favorite hardware stores. And something that I learned recently that I didn't know is that these saws are double-sided, not for rough and fine cuts, but the teeth are actually designed for cross cuts and cutting with the grain. So in this situation, if you look closely at our wood, we have grain that runs along it, and it's like a veinous pattern. And so since we're cutting across the grain, we're going to want to use the finer teeth in the Japanese pool saw. If I was going to be making a cut along like we just did with our table saw, then I would use these larger teeth. So let's go ahead and get our work plan. You'll see that although it's an older method, it's not an unbelievably slow one. Much can be said for manual hand tools, especially if my material were to be out away from my shop somewhere and I had to cut off a piece of it and I couldn't get a power cord, or I don't have a power tool to get out there. It's not tough to carry. So what I like to do is get myself lined up, push to get started, and then there we go. Now, on every pull stroke is when it's doing the cutting. And what I like to do is I like to let the saw do the work. I'm not pushing too hard, not pushing too soft, just kind of almost filing the wood away. And I like to pull back, see where I'm at on my line, and go back into my cut. I'm not super proficient with hand saws, as hand-based woodworking with hand tools is a new sort of pursuit of mine, but I am looking to get better. What I also like to do is I like to pull up on some of these, and that kind of lets me follow my line and get back into my cut to do the work. Support the work, come through. Nope. Flippity flippity, if I didn't tell you which one was which, would you be able to tell which one was hand cut, which one was saw cut? Just so you know, this one was the power tool, this one was the hand saw. Nice. Now here we are over at the miter saw. Luckily, I don't have to check my 90s when I'm making these cuts, because due to the fence and the way that the saw is set up, I know that when that blade comes down, I have it set for a straight cut at 90 degrees. Since we got a little bit of wonky, kind of figuring some things out with the hand tools and stuff like that, this is a good time to be able to square this up. Now, if you don't have a miter saw, this could be done with a hand planer. This could be done with a router and a flush cut bit and something to put behind it that you could run a fence along. There's a bunch of different ways to do it, and I think it would be better if I didn't give way too many options and we just kind of worked with what we had. And if anybody has any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them or show those techniques in another video. So let's go ahead and get these edges squared up and get this piece to a perfect perpendicular 32 inches. Yeah, whoops. Been a minute since I've used the old girl. Forgot to release the locks. There you are. Let her slide. Go ahead. Grab our handy Stanley. Oh, and our pencil. Luckily, my old leave tools laying around skills are still very well developed. So I like to go ahead and mark. We're going to do the same thing. Put a mark there. Put a mark down here. Okay. Put that back in the old holster. Now we're going to go ahead and line that cut up. Now my measurement is right here. And the saw blade itself has a thickness. So I want to make sure that since I measured from the left side to the right side, I want to make sure that no matter what, my blade is going to be on this side of my new line, which runs right here underneath my old one. And the reason for that, as I said, is the saw blade has a thickness, and if you put it straight on, you might end up a 16th under. In some situations, it's not very important, but if you're doing something like cabinetry or fine woodwork, a 16th can mean the difference between a good job and a start over. There we go. It seems like I'm lined up pretty good. Another thing I like to do is run the length of the cut just to have to make sure I'm clear. Looking good. Nice. Let's go ahead and check. You know, always want to make sure you don't have no wonkiness. 32 dead on the money. 32 dead on the money. When I get a better setup that's closer, I'll be able to show you guys better. But for right now, you're gonna have to take my word for it. On to the next. Hello and welcome back to Figuring Out Woodworking. So this piece took a look pretty darn good, top and bottom. But then, if we look at the slightly naughtier one over here, naughty is in behavior, not appearance. We got 32 dead on the bottom, and then here, just barely a hair of a 16th off. For a perfectionist like me, it's not fantastic. And I realize I offered you guys like 30 different possibilities for what you could do. And one of the cheapest, most cost-effective, and simplest ways just literally flew right over top of my head. What about the beautiful old file? Clamp this down, retrace your line, preferably with a razor blade. Oh, sorry. Preferably with a razor blade so you have a nice clean edge to come to. And you can just file her in. And once you're clamped down, you can really get this file set in a way that you're getting a nice, clean 90-degree edge on that. It is going to potentially give you a little bit of tear out, but that's something you can dial in and clean. How can you tell if a file is a wood file? Oftentimes it'll have bigger teeth. Another dead giveaway is if it's rasped on one side, and a rasp looks about like that. Almost like a bunch of sharp little knobs that, like someone took a sharp piece of metal and poked in and stuck them up like on dough or something. So that's called a rasp. That's called a file. I'm starting to kind of get the feeling that maybe since I said it, I should probably get it, huh? So let's go ahead and take a peek here. There's our 32. Now don't take it too personally if this happens to you. It could have been caused by any number of things. For example, a very small piece of debris or something on the edge, or a piece of metal shaving or something got stuck on the side and it just kicked your board out ever so gently from that fence. That's often all it takes, is just a hair. A little here and a little there. So yeah, I feel like that's pretty much my line right there. So I don't want to start at the shallow side, and I'm going to use a razor in a real clean cut, thin line that I can really see. See here, it just gave me ever so gentle, cleaned up that edge, and here it gives me an idea of how much I have to do. Now, since I don't have much and this homestead is new and everything like that, we're only really starting to build the shop, so let me take you on over to my very unique clamping situation. So let me take you through the basics of this beautiful setup we have here. Being that I'm still setting up in the process of moving and homesteading and starting and trying to get with you guys and all this, I have no idea where my C-clamps are at. So as per usual, we are improvising. And this is a situation where I would use my C-clamps. So if you have limited space and you need a vise on your table that can be moved and removed easily, and you're not very much interested in drilling big bolt holes and putting plates and that kind of stuff, a really common setup that a lot of people do, and something that I've been pretty fond of, is doing something similar to this, where you mount either to a plate or a nice piece of wood or something like that. And then you can then take that and move it around, clamp it, set it wherever you need it, store it, and etc. Now, if I was a true woodworker, I would have already gone in and removed the 2 screws that are here and here for these teeth, and replaced them with a custom-made piece of wood or something like that, so that when we really put that clamp pressure down on our work, it doesn't damage it. Since I'm a lazy woodworker, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and slide these in and clamp them down so we can utilize them today. And maybe I'll modify this vise for more specific woodwork in another video some other time. So let's try to get set up. And fortunately, this is one of those nice vices that does this little number right here, which I really like. So let me see, I think I'm going to want it a little bit. Stops there. Okay. I see what you're doing to me. Mean. Alright, let's lock her in. That'll do just fine, as per usual. You're not fully set up. Good enough is good enough. So once again, here's my wood, and here's where we need to be making that slight material removal. Oh, go ahead and pinch this guy in there and make a mess on my table and drive myself crazy and totally negate all that stuff I said about being prepared and organized at the very beginning. Isn't that just like my usual self? Okie dokes. So, now that I'm good and locked, really snug this guy down so we don't run into any issues. Now, I do want to maintain a 90 this direction as much as I can. So, hold on, let's take a little peek. I may not have exactly what we need, but what I do have is this cute little called machinist square. If anything, this is going to tell me that it's very, very square, and I check it both this way and this way across. And so you're not going to be doing it with something like this. I'm just fond of different types of tools and things like that. You probably are going to have a small carpenter square or something like that. And as we get more situated and rocking and rolling, I'll show you more of the tools for squaring and measuring and stuff like that. So let's go ahead and get started. I know that I'm good down here. I know that the majority of the work I need to remove is going to be up here. So trying to do the best that I can to remain perpendicular to the work. As I said, that's this way. I want to be at a 90 degree as I come straight in. So I like to straddle my work, get close. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to work from about where I know it's starting to come out, because it's the widest here and virtually nothing here. So I'm going to start from about here and just start working my material off. The best thing is my file will tell me based on the scraping how even I am to the work, and it'll tell me what to remove and to fill in. Sort of. It's like coloring for grown-ups. Change up direction sometimes. Might get a better cut or a more comfortable position. It's downward, because the grain will tell you what to do with it. Sometimes if it doesn't work one way, it wants you to just ever so gently change your angle. You can almost, I mean honestly, almost work it like this. I don't know if that's an okay technique, but it's worked for me. Let's go ahead and take a peek. So I got no light coming through. Looks like we did a pretty decent job of maintaining 90. Now let's do the important test. See where we're at. Wow, okay, so the front tells me that I'm definitely on 32, but I do have a propensity of working this side more than this side. So take your measurement from the top. Okay, that could use a hair of removal. And let's take a look at the back side here. Okay, see the back side is definitely not as worked as the front. Now I have two options. I can either angle and focus on that side a little bit better, or I can just turn my work around. Another option, of course, like I said, is a manual hand plane, which are going to be your tools like these, but that is, I think, something that be best saved for a whole nother series in its own video. Many men have deliberated for many, many years about those things. I do not wish to get into the middle of that conflict so early in my career here. Nice. Nice, good. Getting a little bit of camber, a little bit of a bow, but that's to be expected with my incapable hands. Okay. There it is. We finally got her in all the way around to 32. And I can be proud of that. Let's go ahead and take a look at our two pieces together. Put it on a nice flat surface. Got a concrete here. Got a little concrete. And those line up just well. And I'm happy with that. Now we can move on. I know we're talking about woodworking, but I would be amiss to say that I don't love being a part of the community that I'm in and doing what I do if we didn't get treated to benefits from the neighbors. Breakfast burritos it is. What are you doing? No, something.